Art. It is a form of communication to tell the audience a bit of who you are, a form of self-expression. Music is arguably the most expressive form of art. All the ranges of emotion a human can express has been written in song, anywhere from expressing one's love to expressing deep sadness. Damn you, Eric Clapton. Gets me every time. Music also serves a purpose to heighten the action of a scene. It has also been created for the purpose of enhancing a narrative in movies, sitcoms, video games, radio shows, pretty much everything you can think of, even for simple elevator music. Today, we will talk about leitmotifs in music, what it is, who made it, what makes it a and what makes it a good leitmotif, and where can we get some more of that good shit. So what is a leitmotif? Well, a leitmotif or leitmotif is that sounds Russian. Is a German word for leading motif. It is defined as musical or literary composition that is associated with a person, place, or an idea. We are going to be discussing purely on musical leitmotifs, and we will be using The Godfather as a main example of leitmotifs along with other notable examples. The history of leitmotif is relatively brief compared to the history of music in general. No one was created with no one was credited with creating the idea of a leitmotif, but the idea became prominent when composer Richard Wagner created music for his operas. He is credited with using hundreds of nameless leitmotifs that relate to events or characters, but he never acknowledged what he was doing as leitmotif. The word leitmotif gained popularity through his critics and other people who analyzed his music, which one of the critics happened to be Claude Debussy, who went on to compose one of the most famous solo piano pieces of all time, Clair de Lune, which is Moonlight in English. Now that we have an idea of what a leitmotif are, we can get right into the musical works of The Godfather, musical works created by No Rota.
Naturally. The Italians, of course. Always the Italians. They're all musical idiots.
What have I ever done to make you treat me so disrespectfully?
Alright, so let's begin with the very first piece of music you hear, The Godfather Waltz. A little fact I found out, when you searched Google for Godfather waltz sheet music, you'll get mostly the love theme, which is very different, but most people don't realize that the Godfather theme is not the love theme. Love theme is a love theme, and the Godfather theme is a waltz that you hear right now. You'll be hearing this theme be played a few more times. The first time is to identify the idea and association with what is going on with the scene, heavily related to Vito and his position as the Godfather. The second instance of the theme plays when Vito is dancing with his daughter. This adds an idea that not only his theme is associated with Vito as the Don, but Vito as a loving father.
Okay, fine. Just go a little closer. Okay, that's it. Just like that now. Hold it.
The next instance of this theme occurs when Waltz wakes up to find Cartoon's head at his feet. You, as the audience, never actually saw how it happened, but this theme cements the idea to the audience that Don Corleone was involved. The context of what is happening on the screen adds to what you hear. You know that Vito's a loving father, he's also a vicious mob boss. The theme also cues when Vito gets shot, but listen closely. The same thing is being played with a lower dynamic, lower and lower, just as if you can hear his heartbeat becoming fainter from the blood loss. The use of dynamic here is amazing and accentuates the sadness of Vito dying. The dynamic in music means how loud or soft the notes are played. When Sonny becomes acting Don in place of Vito, he orders Paulie to be killed in suspect of betraying the family. You'll hear another variation of the Godfather waltz, although this time the soprano is being played with a different instrument. A soprano is one of the four standard voices of music, being at the highest, then there's alto, tenor, and then bass at the lowest.
Leave the gun. Take the cannoli.
This time, the soprano is being played on the clarinet, highlighting the distant and awkwardness of the Godfather waltz you are accustomed to hearing. One of the best examples of leitmotifs in cinema history, in my opinion. A theme where you can associate music with the idea of being the Don of a mob family and changes appropriately to give the audience a richer narrative experience. Speaking of narrative experience, Michael's theme also deserves a bit of the spotlight if we were to talk about leitmotifs. The first instance of his theme we hear is when Michael first arrives at the house after news of his godfather being shot. This first piece of music you'll hear is also a leitmotif, but its association is that of an idea, of tension, uncertainty, possibly danger. How do we know this is Michael's theme instead of an arrangement of the waltz? What is an arrangement? A musical arrangement is a reconceptualization of a previously composed work, changing bits and pieces of it. Here is a
You
visual
want to sell an art
representation of
movie,
Michael's
Godfather.
theme to help
Somebody's
cement the
got to pull the
leitmotif
fruit,
in
thank
your
you.
minds. Now that we have a strong grasp of Michael's theme, let's hear more of it. After Michael arrives at the hospital, the tension then develops further into something horrific. Michael's theme keeps the audience from being too spooked. Like a heroic figure ensuring a scared child that everything's okay, the tension theme still lingers throughout the scene, however.
I'm with you now. I'm with you.
This is the turning point that changes Michael, and the idea is supported by the transformation from Michael's slightly distorted and off variation of his theme to the tension theme. This scene is a
Senti
great
me?
example of diegetic sound. Diegetic, diegetic sound
Dicono
is
tutto me
sound that
capisci, no?
occurs within the film's world
Sei
and can
italiano come
be
tuo
heard
padre.
by the characters as well as the audience. The sound makes it
Tuo padre
abundantly clear
sta male.
of the inner turmoil Michael is facing. The
Ma tu
sound suddenly
giustamente.
disappears when Michael's
Facciamo di
conflict is
fare
gone
un
and
film
decides to be
ognuno
a gangster.
e mettiamo tutto a posto. Sti fissaria. Si deve finire.
I've touched but a fraction of the possible leitmotifs present in the movie, but I believe I made my point. With that, I hope you'll listen more closely to music in cinemas, for they add to and complement the narrative of movies. Well, at least good ones.